All right, so in this particular project, we want to create an invitation for a masquerade for a charity event. So we've already created our graphics and used masks to highlight the particular mask in here and change the color to get it to be whatever color we had intended for the event. So what we want to do now is we want to add the word masquerade, and then we want to add all of the event details. Now, the thing is, when you're working with text, a good design principle is always to have a hierarchy. So it's important to be able to show the title should look a little bit fancier, a little bit more unique. It should stand out, be bigger, bolder, separate. So there are a lot of different design principles that you can use in order to ensure that masquerade is kind of the first piece of text that people see. And text always has a character or a personality to it. So we don't want to use Comic Sans here. In fact, I don't ever want to use Comic Sans, and I recommend that you don't use Comic Sans either, because it tends to have a childish comic feel to it, and it has all these connotations now because people, especially designers, hate Comic Sans because people use it for the most inappropriate reasons. If you want to check this out, you can go to something called Comic Sans Criminal. Just Google search that. So, all right. So for instance, this particular font here, it looks old, but it's still stylish. It has some of these flourishes that kind of match the feathers here, and it's eye-catching. And by coordinating its color blue and making none of the rest of this blue, it stands out. So it becomes kind of our second focal point for this invitation. So this would look weird and kind of like a college font for a varsity football team, because that has nothing to do with what we're seeing in this image. And then what we have here is we have what we call our body type. And this is type that it should be easy to read, and we should organize it in such a way that it is easy to read. So as you can see, this student, when she designed this particular invitation, she made sure that the text was easy to read. It wasn't a hard font or a script font or a thick font, something that, people would struggle to have to really see what was happening. It's also not a boring font like Times New Roman that we see everywhere. And then in order to make it easy to read, so she did a couple of things to help with what we call typesetting. So here's where we have all of our headings, and it's purple to coordinate with the purple here. So that's a good design principle, to always use the colors that you have in your image. And it's been right aligned here, and then all the information is left aligned so that it's easy to see and read along these different lines and see what goes with what. And then this one is the same font, but it's in italics and it's a little bit bigger. And by the fact that it has spacing, you can tell that it's a separate thing than this chunk right here. So we're doing a lot of design principles in here, some basic things that sometimes come naturally to people, and sometimes we have to think about it a little bit more. So to do type in Photoshop, you have to first be aware that there are two different kinds of type. Now, when we go to the type tool, there are other things like vertical type and type mask tool, and that's where you can create a mask to see an image through the font. So that's pretty fun to play with, but we're going to just use the horizontal type tool. But there are actually two different ways to create type. And the first is to create point type. And this is best when you are working with titles or your big headings. So if I just click once, not click and drag, if I just click once, it's going to put a cursor on the page. It gives me a type layer, and now I can start typing. So I'm going to come in here and type MASQUERADE. Okay, so we can't really see what that is because it's too small of a font. So I can double click inside of here. And then up here on the tools options bar, if I hover over here, I can come and choose like a standard font size here, but I like to hover over this T icon. And when I click and drag, that's what we call scrubbing. I can make this as big as fits within that space. Now be careful, because if I go to move this and I click, it's still an active type, so it thinks you want to retype this. So with type, there are two things you can do to set it. You can click on the type layer, or you can click on the move tool. So now that I've clicked on the move tool, I can move it around and put it where I want it. Now I can also do Command or Control T and stretch it out. Just be careful that you don't do that, because then you degrade the integrity of the font. So hold Shift as you're dragging it out, and then you can resize it that way as well. When you're done resizing it, you have to click inside of it and move it and adjust it that way. When you're ready to accept where it's sitting, you can hit the check mark in the Tools options bar to commit it, or you can hit Enter or Return on your keyboard. Okay, so for some reason, I already picked this font, and that's a happy accident. I didn't mean to pick Margaritas, but it actually looks really cool. I like it. But we can come over here to double click on the font, and in the Tools options bar, we can see the font picker. Now here's the cool thing about the font picker. Right now it's hard to see some of these examples. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just click on this type layer and then go up to the type menu and then do font preview size and choose extra large. Now I'll go ahead and collapse this for right now so we can see I have this character panel, and if you want to see that you can go to window and then choose character. So in this character panel, now when I click and drop it down, you can see these really huge sample sizes. Now some of these were built larger than the one I've been using. You can see Margaritas is really small compared to all of these. So you might need to resize once you find another one that works. But Lemonade's not too bad. And I can scroll through here, and you just want to pick things that make sense. So if I were to pick, let's say, Cafe Nero, it just doesn't make sense. It's too alien, it's too modern, it's too wide. It just has a different feel than what a masquerade entails. So fonts are not bad, it's just the people using them that don't make any sense. So like if I did the CF Toux, this is all for like Christmas font where it has all these different hats on it, and it's kind of a crazy font in the first place anyway. So yeah, that's not going to work. Or this changing, it's just too cartoonish. But I've used changing before and it looks really good on other things. It just doesn't look very good right here. I think I've used it for a rodeo before. All right, so I like what I've got here. The only thing is that it's white and it just kind of really feels like a blank, empty text. It just doesn't feel like it's designed. So I'm going to come over here to color and double click, and I'm going to sample a couple of colors in here. And you do want to have a color that is high contrast. So don't pick one of these deep purples because we have a lot of black back here and that's not going to be easy for people to read. So I'm going to come and try some of these light purples. I can even do some of these pinks if I want to do that sort of, you know, there's a lot of purple happening here. So I think I'm wanting to go with some of these lighter, but I don't want to, there we go. That one's not bad. Well, I don't know. That's still getting a little too dark, but we'll leave it there for now and you can mess with it, or you can kind of do that on your own. And you know, with the layers, I might come in here later and choose, if I expand this, I might come in here later and choose that I actually want to change this hue and saturation and change it to a different color, and then I can change this color altogether, which I think I'm going to do. So we'll go ahead and close that, and actually we'll go back to that. And we'll double click. It's because I'm not on there. See, this is what happens when you close your columns. Okay, so I'm going to click on my text and come up here to the properties panel or in the character panel and go to the color. And again, I'm going to sample. Woo, that's so bright, but we're going to do that. That's what we're going with. Okay, so in terms of other type, right now you have this point type where now you can move it around, and if you had other words you could create them as their own point type too and kind of move them around like they're puzzle pieces. But the other type of font is a paragraph type. So I'll grab the type tool, and I know I don't want it to be Margaritas, and I have to be really careful because I'm on the Margaritas layer. It's going to start changing that Margaritas text. So I'm going to change this to maybe a smaller font, and I actually want this to be Helvetica Neue. It's my favorite. So, and I'll make this, we'll do light for right now. So instead of clicking once, I'm going to click and drag. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow me to type a paragraph in here that is confined by the bounds of this box. So this is where I'll say, join us for a night of fun and frivolity. Okay, so we can't see all of that, and that's because it was too big. So if I adjust those boundaries, you can see that the text inside of it adjusts as well. So I can do Command or Control A in here, and obviously my font is way too big, so I'll do 11-point font. And 14, nah, that's starting to look childish, so I'll actually do 11. And I want to center it. Frivolity, however you spell frivolity, to help raise money for Denver Public Schools. Okay, so that's one chunk for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the Move tool to accept that, and then I can click the text tool again and drag another one out. And this is where I can do something like date. And maybe to help people read it, I'll do all capitals for the date, and then I'll say October 31st, 2018, and time, oops, all capitals, 7 p.m. to midnight. Location, oops, location, Buell Theater. Okay, so I'm just totally making this up, but there you go. So see how that's a little bit hard to read because it's all the same font, and yes, we do have some capital letters. So what you can do is you can come in here and highlight some part of the text and change it to a different color that still coordinates with this graphic. So for each one of these, I can come in and highlight, and you do want to keep it the same color, so kind of sample from the same area, and that makes it a lot easier for people to read. So that's the big difference. So now I can squeeze this down. I can make it taller if I needed to, but it's confining it to the boundaries. So those are our two different types. And I do like to keep each kind of chunk in its own box so that I can easily move it around. And maybe I want to do some flourish right here, or a line right here, or maybe the, what are those? The comedy and tragedy masks. So anyway, that's the basics of working with type, looking at the personality, using the character panel, sampling color from your image so it looks right, making sure you have both type that stands out in style, but also type that's easy to read for the body text, and then just keeping things in chunks so that you can move them around and really get a more flexible design. So as you can see, I have something totally different, but that's acceptable, and so is this. And other people, if you look up, if you research some other invitations, they do a more formal where they really write everything out, and they say instead of like 7 p.m., they do 7 o'clock in the evening. So you can do some of those more formal invitations as well.